Okay, so the key question for most organisations looking at the Green Deal now is what role do you play, and in particular, should you be a Green Deal provider or not? And if you are going to be a Green Deal provider, should it be just you, or should you be in partnership with a range of other organisations, and if so, whom? Those are the kind of key strategic questions for many organisations, be they social landlords or construction contractors or local authorities, or indeed utilities and finance companies. So let's look a bit more at Green Deal providers and the kind of form they might, the kind of shape they might take, and what's involved in being one. Well, the government have within the consultation already suggested there might be a whole range of different models, and I'll highlight three. The obvious one is a one-stop shop. One organisation takes on all the roles apart from the customer, the provider, the assessor, the installer, and maybe even the financier, and just packages it all together, and that's a one-stop shop, so they source and deliver the project. Other alternatives are you could be a brand, a national brand that has contact with a lot of customers, and act as a Green Deal provider, so a little bit like an insurance company. If you have a substance claim on your property or whatever, you go to your insurance company as a national brand, but they will subcontract quite often to local small businesses to actually do the work. So the national brand's acting as the coordinator, probably has all the IT systems and everything else, but the work's done by local partners. That's the second model. And the third model is a local organisation, so maybe a social landlord, maybe a local authority, acting as a front end, so then they're not necessarily the Green Deal provider themselves, but they deal with the customer. So I go to my local council, I say I want a Green Deal, they say yes, we offer Green Deals, but actually they're acting as a front for B&Q or British Gas or one of the larger national providers, maybe a completely new Green Deal provider company behind them, and they just do the initial customer management in return for some consideration by that company. And that model, a local organisation with a national provider, is also one that might work. And indeed, that's the direction Birmingham seem to be travelling in with their particular Green Deal approach. So those are the options. And how do you actually decide what's the right model for you? Well, clearly you have to get your mind around the Green Deal, but there are also some minimum requirements you need to take on board and sign up to as a Green Deal provider. And if you're not prepared to do that, that immediately rules out being a provider. So first of all, you have to comply with the Green Deal Code of Practice. What is that? The Green Deal Code of Practice is essentially signing up to working through the customer journey process that I showed you earlier. So in particular, things like giving the customer an opt-out. If you do the assessment for them, they could go to another provider, etc., and agreeing to work in that particular way. You have to sign up to a Green Deal agreement with an electricity supplier, which is about making the money flow back to you. You have to have a CCA licence, Consumer Credit Act licence, as a financial body, because you're offering credit to people. That's not so difficult to get hold of, in fact, and it's not so expensive, so that's not a major hurdle. But you are signing up to be monitored, and you have to actually work in particular ways, and you can be inspected, etc. Ones that are potentially more significant for you, if you're a small organisation, you have to make provision for continuity in the event of insolvency or discontinuation. What that essentially means is you will have to provide a guarantee or a bond that will cover all the warranties and all the work, so that your customers aren't left high and dry. How much will that cost? I don't know. What form might it take? It could be a personal guarantee. I discussed this with one financial institution. They said, well, a personal guarantee over some assets, which of course was very frightening if you're a small business owner. So that's a serious area you do have to get your mind around. You have to sign up to an independent conciliation process, so the customers have the right of appeal. And you are the key point of redress for customers. So you're agreeing to be the first point of contact for redress. If they have a problem with any of the works done in their building, they will come to you. You then have to go back through the supply chain to find the person who can fix that problem. You're subject to independent review, and the customer can appeal to an ombudsman if they're not happy with the redress you give them, and you're liable for compensation within a six-year limit if anything goes seriously wrong. So for small construction companies, those are clearly big new obligations that they're not familiar with. If you're a local authority, a social landlord, or a major utility, maybe you're more familiar with those and more comfortable with them. You need to be aware they're there, though, if you're considering becoming a Green Deal provider. Okay, the Green Deal hinges around a contract in the end between the person in the building today, which is the occupier who may not be the owner, the building owner themselves, the landlord, and the Green Deal provider who's taking on all these obligations. And that contract's called the Green Deal Plan. And that's what triggers access to this whole mechanism of allocating the funding to the meter and recovering it in that way. So the Green Deal Plan has to meet the golden rule, and it also has to be fully repaid within the lifetime of the measure. So you could conceive of a case where you have an installation that meets the golden rule, but only if it repays over 30 or 40 years when the measures will be out of the building within 15. That wouldn't be acceptable for a Green Deal plan. Has to be supported by adequate warranties, so all the equipment used has to be warranted, insurance backed. And you can include other costs like maintenance as well as capital. And you have to follow certain rules in terms of the interest rate structure you offer on your Green Deal. So they can be fixed rate, but they can also be variable rate, but not too variable. Allowable costs, important to understand what you can include and what you can't include. You can include preparatory costs and making good costs. You can include unexpected costs. You can even include costs of an incentive, so incentive for the customer to buy the Green Deal, which might be £150 up to 5% of the costs of the work. But you've got to meet the golden rule. So all those things make it harder to meet the golden rule. You can also use the eco, so if there's capital subsidy available from grant scheme like eco, you can use that, but you can't use subsidy from feed-in tariffs or renewable heat incentive. And I'm not going to go into whether that's actually fair or unfair, or the government's being consistent or not, because I think we could spend a long time on that topic on its own. How can this possibly work? There's clearly a lot of detail still to go in there. The only way I can see it working at the moment is if we deal only with very simple technologies where people can see in advance that the golden rule is going to work, so they can keep the assessment costs down and keep them very low, or possibly business as usual for very large organisations who've already got the systems in place to make this work. So I'm sceptical in the end that the rhetoric in the Green Deal about providing access to small businesses and allowing innovation in the market can really be realised, because I think we've put so much burden on the Green Deal through consumer protection, all these get-out clauses, which are essentially adding cost and risk, which all has to be borne by installation companies or Green Deal providers. That cost is hidden away, and very few people would be willing to take that on at a scale less than very large national provider. So I think we're designing a scheme here which is fundamentally only for the big boys at the moment, but because the details are still to be sorted out, we have to reserve judgment.